Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Councillor Steve Pitt. I'm the Leader of Portsmouth City Council and the Chair of this meeting of the Cabinet. Bit of housekeeping before we get started. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble by Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be recorded and broadcast on the website, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. We have read the report and we took it to full council yesterday and we've had some feedback from that. So officers, please highlight developments that have occurred since publication or a summary of events. Natalie, over to you. Oh no, hang on a second. I'm jumping. My fault. Deputations today, we've got one, Anna, is that correct? And that's you, John? Okay. So we've got one deputation from Unison, from John Woods. We have no apologies. Members, any declarations of interest? None. Okay. Just before we do that, I'm going to go around the room though, so everybody say who they are for anyone watching online, starting with Natalie.
Thank you, Leader. Natalie Brommer-Pill, Chief Executive.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Matthew Willington, Cabinet Member for Community Wellbeing, Health and Care.
Hugh Mason, Cabinet Member for City Planning and Development.
Peter Candlish, Cabinet Member for Transport.
So I'm Councillor Lee Hunt and I'm the Cabinet Member for Community Safety, Parks and Open Spaces.
Good afternoon, Chris Atwell, Cabinet Member for Central Services.
Councillor Dorrington, Cabinet Member for Children, Families and Education.
Darren Sanders, Cabinet Member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness.
Kimberly Barrett, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Greening the City.
Dave Ashmore, and I help look after environmental services.
Okay, and in attendance at today's meeting we have Councillor Graham Heaney. Graham, would you just like to introduce yourself and say who you are?
Councillor Graham Heaney, Deputy Leader of the Labour Group, in attendance, just observing.
Thank you very much. And we have
Paddy May, Corporate Strategy Manager.
Thank you, Paddy. And finally, John, do you want to formally introduce yourself?
Yes, John Woods, I'm the Chair of Portsmouth City Unison Branch.
Okay, would you, I'll get Natalie to introduce the report and then I'll come to you to do your deputation, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Cabinet. So the report in front of you is the same report that was considered yesterday by full council. The report is an extension of the where we were in January when I brought the report to you before we submitted the request to become on the devolution priority programme, which we were successful with that, and on the 5th of February we were notified by the Minister that we were one of 6 places that were chosen in the country to be part of the devolution fast-tracked process. That in turn means that local government reorganisation will have to happen, and it's going to be happening on a quicker timetable than the rest of the local authorities that are not on the fast track programme. But I will expand a little bit on that, which the report also does, and a submission. But I think just to be clear that the report in front of you is about 2 things, and 2 independent things with an area of crossover. The first of those is around devolution, and it's our response, our council response to the devolution consultation, which closes on the 13th of April, and there is a draft response at the end of the document in Appendix A. That is still a draft response. We are still waiting for officers to embellish in certain areas what that response is, but because of time, and we don't have another full cabinet meeting before that is actually close, that consultation, that's why it's come here for that agreement to submit it between myself and the leader. The devolution priority programme is pressing ahead at the point where at the moment it's in the consultation phase, which I'm sure all members will be aware of. There is an event here in the Guildhall tomorrow, and from what we understand, it will go fairly quiet after that consultation process closes. There'll be a process where the government will consider the responses, and then we will be told whether it's getting the green light to go ahead. In which case, around autumn, early autumn, we think September time, the government will look for an opportunity to lay the legislation in front of Parliament. And that's why one of the recommendations talks about giving delegated authority to myself, because we are informed it often comes with 24 hours notice, and therefore for me to convene a full council meeting or a cabinet meeting in that time is quite challenging. So the MHCLG officials requested us to ask for that. We are working in concert with, obviously, the other upper tier authorities across Hampshire, so that's Southampton, the Isle of Wight and Hampshire County Council, about pulling devolution together. And the report itself goes into a little bit more detail about what we're doing in that regard in terms of the activities that are likely to be included in that devolution deal. If you look back to the reports that we presented in January, it's very much a set offer of what devolution will look like for this area, rather than previous national offers which looked at a negotiation between local government and central government about powers that could come down. This much it really is a set menu is what I refer to it as, in terms of this is what's on offer, and then if you mature as a combined authority going forward, then you can ask for more delegated powers to be coming down from central government to the elected mayor. The report also goes on to talk about the elected mayor elections which are proposed, because we're on the devolution priority programme for, I think it's May the 7th next year in 2026, and obviously in the time between getting the go-ahead from the government, the legislation being agreed in front of Parliament, we then have to establish a strategic authority. So we'll have a few months to establish the strategic authority, which will be an organisation in its own right, and it will also require a number of posts appointed to that strategic authority in readiness for the elected mayor to take up their post on the 8th of May 2026. So that's the devolution report, and separately, but slightly related, because there are elements of this that intersect, which will be those strategic elements around planning and transport, for example, the strategic approach around skills and employment support. They will all be probably lifted from what local authorities are currently doing and would move up to the strategic authority. So there are elements which will link into local government reorganisation going forward, i.e. those activities that will remain with local authorities and those that will go up to a strategic authority. So the rest of the report talks about local government reorganisation and where we are with that. So on the 5th of February, we also received the timetable from the Minister, which said that because we, well, two things, that all local authorities are required to put in their interim proposals by the 21st of March, so this Friday, of what local government reorganisation for the area may look like. There was a request from the Minister that ideally they want to look for one plan for each of the areas rather than several. And so we have been working with the other 14 local authorities across Hampshire for the last 4 or 5 weeks at pace to try and come up with a plan and an interim plan that we are in agreement to submit. That interim plan, we appointed KPMG to help and assist us with that, to pull a lot of the data together, which is what is appended to the back of the document as Appendix 2. That document is basically, I think, the common ground view of where all the 15 authorities have got to. There may be different opinions in terms of how we've got there, but that document represents the common ground to where we've got to so far, and it is proposed that that is our interim submission to government on Friday. Acknowledging that there will be other authorities that will be making their own individual cases about what does LGR mean for their areas going forward as well. You can see in, I think it's section 4.16 in the report, these are a number of the points that we have been making since that report was requested of us, and in those conversations about Portsmouth's position and our unique position, especially being that we are a unitary authority already. And there are a number of arguments and criteria that we've put forward, but also criteria that the government have asked us to submit our interim proposal by, which we've done some of that, but not all of it, because we haven't got to the position with the other 15 authorities to get to that position where we're all agreeing on a number of things. And we're saying to central government that this is going to be a work in progress over the next 6 months. So I said earlier about because we were on the devolution priority programme, the devolution priority programme has put us on a fast track programme as well for LGR. So originally we were promised a longer period of time if we were on the devolution priority programme, but what actually transpired is that actually we're given 2 months less than everybody else. So we're asked to submit our responses, our final detailed business cases on the 26th of September, whereas everybody else has been given till the 28th of November. So we are making a request in our joint submission with the other authorities with that ask that we should be pushed to the 28th of November like everybody else. There are also a number of areas within that interim plan that you can see which also talks about boundaries, and whilst the government are suggesting that they prefer the building blocks of whole districts coming together, they are able to consider cases, if they are strong enough cases, for existing district borough kind of boundaries to be amended. And so we have also put that into our interim plan that we want the government to consider that going forwards, because we believe that we need to be looking at a further area of search so that we can try and create the most financially sustainable new unitary authority, which is supposed to withstand financial shocks going further. So that's also something that we have some of us have agreed across the county and some of us haven't, but that's why it's there as a request for the Minister to actually consider, and that we will put more detailed plans together with those requests, which we have said we will be based on public consultation going forward. I think that's it in terms of some of our very key areas, but clearly there are a number of areas the government asked us around barriers and challenges for pulling your plans together. We have done those in concert with the other 14 authorities, and that's also addressed within the document. So we will submit on the 21st, and then we've got 6 months to pull together our detailed plans of what the local authority arrangements are going to be. So who we will merge with to get to the 500,000 minimum population required. As you'll see in the report, the population of Portsmouth is 210,000, so we have to more than double in size to get to the government requirement. And we are assuming we can only go north because we are all supporting, all 15 authorities are supporting for the Isle of Wight to be retained as a special case and a standalone unitary by itself. So we would only look north to create that population requirement. And I know that several letters have gone to the Minister requesting the Isle of Wight, but I think the responses are that they will be determined once all LGR proposals are submitted at the end of the week. We assume they will have to go through an exercise. So that, in short, is the report. Obviously, we have had a long conversation about it in here, I think on 2 occasions, and then also yesterday at full council, there were a number of points that all councillors were able to make about the report that we will feed into, not the joint submission, because the joint submission is a KPMG document that we've all agreed to, the 15 authorities, but perhaps separately, in a separate letter that the leader will send. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Natalie. Chris, is there anything you wanted to add from a finance perspective? Any updates?
Yeah, if I could just make reference to the deficits of Hampshire County Council that are quoted in paragraphs 4.14 and also 4.15. I think the figure there that describes a budget deficit of 216 million and relates to the year 2026-27, that should read, we understand now, 136 million, and we've had that confirmation from the County Council. And also that will also be reflected in the submission that goes to government on the 21st of March through the KPMG work.
I think because that's quite a big difference, I'm going to ask Natalie to confirm where we were given the figure of £216 million and therefore why it was in the report.
Okay, so as we were going through the KPMG work with the consultants and the 15 leaders and the 15 chief executives, that figure was actually amended in the KPMG report to reflect the 216 as it was for the reference to Southampton. So it came from, obviously, a meeting we had with all the leaders, hence why it was put into the KPMG report. But I think our plan was published, our papers were published after that came to light, after the publication of the county proposals last week. But I think they have formally requested for the KPMG report to be amended to reflect that.
And to be clear, I was told an hour ago. So not ideal, but it is what it is. Nevertheless, it's still a very big chunk of change and it's only going north. So not irrelevant by any means that there is that deficit, and I don't think it actually changes anything. They started last year with a very similar figure and ended up at 180 million by the end of the year. So we know that things are rather parlous over there and therefore need to be addressed. Anyway, we can pick up the rest of that in comments. Paddy, is there anything you wanted to add since you've been so immersed in them?
Nothing to add, thank you, Leader.
Thank you. In that case, I'll come to John now then, if you'd like to do your deputation.
Thank you. Oops. Yes, I'm making the deputation on behalf of Portsmouth City Unison, which is the largest trade union representing Portsmouth City Council employees. I'm speaking to oppose the report because of three things. Firstly, it does not go anywhere near far enough in standing up to central government in opposing the current local government reorganisation proposals. Secondly, the report does not emphasise how serious a threat local government reorganisation in its current proposals is to the council workforce. And lastly, the report does not acknowledge how significant the trade unions are as key stakeholders. There's one mention of the trade unions in that they've been engaged. The government's proposals for wholesale local government reorganisation were not in the recent Labour Party election manifesto or referred to anywhere before the Chancellor's announcements in late 2024. The government has absolutely no mandate for this reorganisation. The timescales for such a huge upheaval are completely and utterly unrealistic. The context, if you look, the Local Government Association noted about the spending review that's due on the 11th of June, that councils could face up to an £8 billion funding black hole by the year 28-29, and said many councils will be left having to make impossible choices on what desperately needed services they can provide in the future. We believe that the reorganisation is intended by central government to cut even further local authority funding. It's based on flawed assumptions from a single county council's network commissioned report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and practical experience in those areas which have been through a unitarisation process have not shown significant savings or better services. Such a wholesale reorganisation will impact on council services over several years and create a long period of unnecessary uncertainty for all local government workers. The workload for the Human Resources Department, for the trade unions and the workforce in general will be immense. Just a few of the examples. Different councils have different terms of conditions, leave allowances, mileage rates, subsistence payments, flexible working policies, and a whole host of other terms and conditions that will vary from council to council. Portsmouth is part of national pay bargaining, but we have a unique pay spine. We have a different job evaluation scheme, I think, to virtually every other council in the country. How are we going to resolve equal pay claims? How are we going to work out all those policies? It's a huge amount of work on top of the additional work that people are doing. And with no additional funding, I see no extra money being found to fund this reorganisation. In other words, I think there's going to be a real pressure on a race to the bottom in terms of terms and conditions. And so that's a key threat for us in terms of the workforce. We also need to, if this is going to go through, and I say if, because I think there should be more opposition to actually say, hang on a minute, this is just completely ill thought out and we should be blocking it. If there is going to go, there's a huge amount of work. The trade union facility time and secondments are going to be absolutely have to be upped massively. Another factor is that some councils have privatised services. Merging councils that have both privatised and in-house services will create problems. We want to see all services brought back in-house if that situation arises. Another threat is councils will combine services, HR, payroll, legal services, etc., and using these as an opportunity to make further redundancies, are yet another threat to the council workforce. We held a lunchtime meeting a few weeks ago, and we heard what members thought of local government reorganisation. A strong theme was concerned to the services they deliver and care so passionately about will be reduced. We heard from people in social care who know how difficult it is to get hold of a social worker in Hampshire. We talked to people about schools transport, how difficult it is to get that service in Hampshire, and how actually effectively Portsmouth does function pretty well, despite all the difficulties we've had, and people don't want to lose that. People are really fearful about the future of their services and the future of their jobs. So local government is on its knees after years of austerity and cuts, and we cannot keep on doing business as usual and do this on top. Council workforces cannot be expected to do this extra work. It's less like turkeys voting for Christmas and more like turkeys peeling the potatoes, setting the oven to roasting temperature and making their own stuffing. If our members are told to do the additional work on local government reorganisation and where our members are concerned about their health and safety and their pressures, we could consider taking action. For example, if there was a successful industrial action ballot for action short of strike action, Unison could support members who refuse to do additional work to protect their health and safety. Unison's position, and the position it urges the City Council to take up, is that there can be absolutely no work on local government reorganisation until central government and Portsmouth City Council give us 5 guarantees. The first guarantee, resolution of the crisis in local government funding. Councils have lost between 40 and 50% of their funding since 2010. We cannot even begin to consider reorganisation of local government until we have adequate funding. Secondly, council debts must be wiped clean. We cannot have a situation where Portsmouth City Council is shackled with debts from Hampshire County Council. It's simply not acceptable for the people of Portsmouth and the workforce of Portsmouth City Council to pay the price of debts from another authority as a result of years of austerity. Thirdly, there must be a guarantee of no redundancies. Local government reorganisation must not be used as a method to further slash council workforces. Fourthly, there must be a guarantee of no cuts in terms and conditions for any council worker. We've got to go for the most favourable terms and conditions. We already have a recruitment and retention crisis across councils. And fifthly, there must be a guarantee that there will be no further privatisation or outsourcing of public services, and where councils merge, there is a privatised in-house service is brought in. It's clear that the local government reorganisation proposals are not set in stone and are likely to get challenges from a range of different organisations. Unison expects the City Council to take a more combative response to the local government reorganisation proposals. If it does, the Council can expect support from Unison and a willingness to campaign together to protect local services, local democracy and the Council workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I agree with pretty much everything you've said, to be perfectly honest, which may even come as a surprise to you, but it is where we are. Just to respond on a couple of things, on your 5 things, the funding, we absolutely agree with you. It's got to be a red line. And that's not just for us, actually, but that's for the other 14 councils as well, who all agree that the Hampshire position must be fully addressed. The debts wiped clean thing, I think there's some nuance to that, because where people have borrowed for commercial purposes and that's producing a revenue income, not really a debt, but where there is bad debt, that's an issue. But it is a separate issue to the revenue gap that exists with Hampshire, which is structural and articulated by Chris just now. It is actually it's very clear, and I'm very happy to be corrected here, but it's very clear from the plan put in front of us by government, the redundancies of exactly what they do wish to see, because they want to see, particularly at a management level and above, they want to see savings made by efficiencies of scale. So I would say that is inherent in their policy. In terms of the T's and C's, I absolutely agree with you, and we would want to fight for the very best outcomes for all of our workforce. And the no further privatisation piece as well. I think we've got a good record as an administration over the last few years of bringing services back in-house where we can. So we're certainly not looking to do that. Ironically, we might have a bit of a battle on our hands with those who don't benefit from their potholes being fixed within 24 hours when ours are, which is one of the few bits of privatisation which actually our residents hugely have benefited from over the years compared to our neighbours, and that's going to cause its own issues, no doubt. So broadly, we're in alignment with you, I believe, colleagues. There was lots of things there that I'll be repeating shortly. But the key one that I did want to address is the extent to which we're pushing back. So before we go into the debate, colleagues, I think it's really important that we set the tone of where we are today and what this is about. And the phrase that's been used by a number of other council leaders and chief executives is this is to get us through the gate. So the gate is the 21st of March. That's the submission that the government wanted back. It was basically, tell us what you can tell us by the 21st of March and what you're agreeing about, because there was a request for a single submission. So I'll be completely straight with everybody. What's in here is a camel. It's a horse designed by a committee. It's a lowest common denominator almost by definition, because that's the bits that we were able to agree on. The elephant in the room is the stuff that we didn't agree on. And that's why it's explicit within the report that I will be writing a letter next week raising many of the issues that you've referenced today, John, and more, that are particularly around how any future change may happen. But that will be a Portsmouth position which is distinct from the other 14 councils. And I think it's increasingly likely that after the 21st of March, there will very quickly be an alignment of the local authorities in Hampshire around a certain position that we will then collectively pursue. Not everyone may join that camp, but that's almost an inevitability of this process. But I do need to make the point that if we refuse to participate and we just say no, the Minister has been absolutely clear that they will do it to us and use a ministerial direction to do it. So we will lose any control over the process. So it's absolutely crucial that from here on in we are going along with what's been asked to do, but we are doing so with no enthusiasm whatsoever, and we are repeatedly making the case of hands off Portsmouth, leave us alone, we're a viable unitary. And something that popped up in a discussion earlier on today, and one of the reasons why we're asking for the ability to consult with areas around what is assumed would be our merger point of Fareham Gosport and haven't. Not that any of them are particularly rushing towards this either, particularly not Gosport or Fareham. We, in order to not be the poorest in terms of the multiple indices of deprivation and our business rates and our council tax income of the new unitaries that were formed in Hampshire, we must consult with areas just outside our boundary, because that's absolutely crucial to any future viability. Now, some people agree with that and some people don't amongst the other council leaders, but it will be our clear position, because the irony is that otherwise, in order to become a sustainable authority, as we are now, it would be impossible to do that without including some of those other areas. So in order to go from where we are now, quite happily ploughing our path and getting on with things, great working relationship with the unions, for which we're extremely grateful, but also a really dedicated workforce, all focused on the city of Portsmouth. In order to just be able to financially stand up and have half a chance going forward, if the government addresses the debt, we've got to expand hugely across South East Hampshire. So where is the sense in that? And you lose all the sense of identity that we have in local communities along the way, and create a huge period of uncertainty, as you've quite rightly said, for our workforce, which we do not wish to see. Recruitment issues are still very acute, and who on earth is going to want to go and work for something that's about to be abolished? It's absolutely mad. Every day that goes by, I'm more and more convinced that this is the craziest thing I think I've ever come across. The speed at which it's being pushed through, the determination with which it's being pushed through without consulting with anybody, including the unions, but even with us. Nobody's being asked, that's the point. So we are pushing back, and we've asked for that extra time to consult, but I firmly believe that their current timeline is unachievable, and that the only way to do this at all well, if it's to have a positive outcome, is over a much longer timeline where people have got the opportunity to be properly consulted and brought into the process. This is government doing to, not government doing with. They're doing it to the councillors, they're doing it to the council employees, they're doing it to the trade unions, they're doing it to the people of Portsmouth. There is no collaboration in this process. This is we say, you do. And that is not acceptable. And as you quite rightly pointed out, it was not in their manifesto. So I hope that gives you some confidence that we are very much in your corner. And I'll now open up the floor to general debate. Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I don't know if John was listening to what you said in the full council yesterday, but it may have fed back to him. But you've made it really clear. We presented red lines, so the previous case and yesterday, we presented red lines, almost reflecting everything that Mr. Wood said, and you made it very clear that if the government was to impose upon us all the things that you described, that was, for example, taking on debts from other places, no matter how much it is, or causing these terrible problems which you know all about, that we would say no. And that has been our position all the way through and will continue to be. I've got some things to say, and I'm glad Councillor Heaney is here, because this is I've been around this sort of stuff for a long time now, nearly best part of 30 years, and as the leader says, I have never seen anything like this at all, and it's remarkable, perhaps not so remarkable, that it comes from a Labour government. But it isn't Labour, is it? It's not Labour anymore. It really isn't. It doesn't give a monkeys about people, older people, women. It doesn't give a monkeys about workers at all. It doesn't. Driving a coach and horses through everything that Labour ever once was. It's gone. It's completely finished. Similar to the Tory party, it's completely changed. They've all moved to the right, and they're doing things that only right-wing parties might do. So for me, these is callous ministers and civil servants behaving more like political commissars from the former Soviet Union. There is no vote on this, not for people out in the street. There is no referendum. Just political diktat from an oppressive government that's seeking to defund, I think, as Mr. Woods said, the local government and democracy. And this is about really, as Mr. Woods said, and people beginning to understand, about not the redistribution of wealth that Labour once stood for, but the redistribution of debt. And to slash the workforce, which is already disillusioned and frustrated. But this government is going for this hard and fast and further than even the last right-wing government. They are, without question now, to the right of Rishi Sunak. And even he's saying this is all wrong. So, for me, this is really wrong. I'm only a little local councillor with a small voice, but this is just harming Portsmouth for all the reasons that Mr. Woods described, and I'm entirely on his side. And I've no doubt that the workforce here is very concerned. They've got every right to be concerned, and yet we see the Labour Party several times in this city council backing its government and trying to delete the red lines that we put forward at the last cabinet. They joined together with that right-wing party, the Pips, to try and delete our red lines, which you described, Mr. Woods, just now. And it is extraordinary. I just hope that it all collapses. I really do. Perhaps it will. Perhaps some of these Labour MPs might find some mettle and stand up to these political commissars traipsing around as ministers, imposing their will on people right across the country. But more locally, and Mr. Woods, you may have even considered this, we look at our really successful property portfolio, and I'm sure that others will mention this in a minute. But for me, over many years of investment, seeing council taxpayers invest and taking risk in a property portfolio, and including the international port here, enormously successful, attracting cruise liners and so on. To see then that it's quite possible that those councillors from all the other areas will outvote us in the near future, if this were to go through, and that they would decide to sell off the ferry port. And when we were in Gas the other day, the officer said, well, it's hardly likely, Councillor Hunt, because, you know, it provides £8 or £9 million a year. But of course it does. So if they don't sell it off, that £8 or £9 million that we use to employ people in libraries, community centres, in our sports programmes, and all the other things that we do, that will have to be shared between us, Gosport, Fareham, Havant, and anywhere else that comes in or doesn't come in. Which is why the leader, I think, is trying to look a little bit north to include some of those Winchester boroughs. He's not talking behind closed doors. He's trying to do his level best so that if this does go through, and it is forced upon us, that Portsmouth is in the best position to maintain services. And I don't think that we should tie his hands over that, as the Labour Party tried to do yesterday in the council, by saying he was talking behind closed doors. Oh, for heaven's sakes. So it's a real big problem. You know, that money that we do use to do those community, the non-discretionary services, could just evaporate to pay off debt. Could just evaporate to do the sorts of things that we're used to having here would just disappear. I mean, the leader talked about last time. He told us how Gosport, Havant and Ferrum have only one cultural officer between them. What is the success of this city? It is the creative and cultural industries. So that all gets put at risk by this so-called local government reform, which Mr. Woods is absolutely correct about. The government has no mandate for, none whatsoever. It's piggybacking devolution, and to hear from the chief executive and the leader that we did what they wanted around devolution to secure the best deal for Hampshire and Portsmouth, then because we did that, they broke their promise. They broke their promise and shafted us by saying, well, now you've got to do LGR even more quickly than before, when we were going to give you more time. And the leader's described to us his frustration when he comes back and reports to the Cabinet and others that how he's got agreement from a minister or a civil servant or whomever the one day, and the chief executive working loads and loads of hours to try and catch up with ministers who just keep changing their mind and moving goalposts. And it's awful. It really is awful. And this Labour government is shameful. Utterly, utterly shameful. It has mandate for devolution. And we saw Labour yesterday trying to conflate the two things. But it has no mandate for local government reform. And it's not implied either through devolution. If they'd have said, and I've said it before, if they'd have said, by the way, at the last election, we're going to, Labour had said in their election manifesto, by the way, they talked about devolution, people went with it. By the way, but we're going to force Portsmouth to go in. Havant, Gosport and Ferrum, those MPs wouldn't have won. They really would not have won. I don't know who would have won, but I know that the Labour MPs would not have been successful, which is why they have misled people. They need to grow a pair, all of them, and stand up to this oppressive, callous government. I think it's callous. And I'm very surprised and utterly disillusioned by it.
Thank you, Lee. Colleagues? Darren?
Thanks, Steve. Trust is increasingly important in politics and public policy. Yesterday, you and I were accused, not by people in this room, because we're all far too sensible in this room, of saying one thing in private and another thing in public. No backup, no evidence. We still haven't got any evidence. 24 hours later, I asked for some, still ain't got it. Mind you, a few days beforehand, we were both told we should be set on fire for antibacterial purposes, for the crime of exercising our great British freedoms. So trust matters. And one of the problems we've got in all of this is that there doesn't appear to be any. Devolution, we understand. We as Liberal Democrats may not like mayors, we don't like the concentration of power much. But Labour has a mandate to do it, and Labour has a mandate to do it through mayors. And so we will accept half a loaf rather than nothing. There are 2 points I hope the Chief Executive can deal with later on, which is one around particularly the bus improvement programmes and where that might lie within any passenger transport executive. Ours has been very good, Hampshire less so. And the other bit is what sort of autonomy would exist for the individual unitary authorities vis-à-vis the mayor. So devolution, we understand. Local government reorganisation, as Lee has rightly outlined, not in there at all. And this is about trust. And the first bit is when we're supposed to, is little basic things like when we're supposed to get the stuff in by. We were first told that to be on the fast track meant we had more time. We're now being told we have less time. And this is where I'm going to start talking about some of the things that have been discussed in private, in public. Because we know that what the 26th of September really means is that 15 councils have to come up with a process in July, because nobody fancies working through August. That's crazy. We need as much time as possible to try and put this camel back together again, and that's why it's important we have as much time as possible. The second bit is around little things like how big they are, how big these authorities should be. And again, there's a lack of trust. My favourite one remains on the Monday afternoon, the local government minister turning round and saying, yes, no council has to be forced to do this. And at 5 o'clock the following day saying, oh, yes, you have. Now, that doesn't generate trust. And trust is important in politics. And trust really matters. The third aspect of trust is around how to handle the money. And the government says, yeah, well, we've done this before. I've talked with the Liberal Democrat leader of Somerset about 10 days ago, who has no hair, partly because he inherited a basket case that makes the £136 million, which is the county's latest figure for structural deficits, may change tomorrow, who knows, look like a tea party. He's laying off, John, he's laying off 550 jobs. He's having to sell assets because he didn't get the financial assurances from the Conservative government that may have actually made that thing work. And us and Surrey and Essex are all in the same boat. We are seriously looking at an authority that should go bust on day one. We may have to declare bankruptcy on day one if we are forced into the shotgun marriage. So I'll also share some information some of the things I've said to people when I've talked to local government and MP leaders and MPs in the last 2-3 weeks. I've said, firstly, that we in Portsmouth should not be part of this. We are sustainable public services. The white paper specifically rules out councils like us. And I've said we feel like Manchester United before the Glazers took over. You know that it's coming. You know they want to turn a successful authority into the most indebted thing you can imagine, purely to satisfy their ego. The football fans get it. The Manchester United fans particularly get it. But that's one of the issues that we face. And we have to be straight with people. I've just come from a meeting to discuss rough sleeping. That's not a statutory service. We don't have to do it. We do it because we want to. We want to get people off our streets into safe and secure accommodation. And there's a real risk that's going to go on day one. What do I say to a rough sleep? Oops, terribly sorry. That's crazy and immoral. It doesn't have to happen. Other things I say to local government leaders is, well, where is the money? We need the money. I've said that to some councillors, some of whom may be in this room, that the important thing is the cash. I was delighted that Councillor Heaney outlined that yesterday, and I'm pretty sure that Graham will go back and talk to half the Labour Party and everybody he knows to put that case, because that really does matter. If we do not get financial assurances, we are going to go bust on day one, friends. And we don't want to do that. And that would turn a sustainable council into a camel. So I'm not particularly happy about this. I'm really worried about our future. I think it's the opposite of sustainable public services. I'm amazed that there are some people who believe that Horndean and Liphook should be together because they've always been together, rather than look at economic growth. And this is the other problem I have, and the lack of trust, which is it's not clear actually what the government wants reorganisation to achieve. Is it about saving money? Is it about generating the growth mission? Is it about streamlining it so there's fewer people to talk to? It seems to be, depending on what day of the week it is, all three. And that's a real problem for us. Another thing I say to other people in private, which I'll say in public, is I don't understand why a government that believes that House of Lords reform is too hard decides to embark on this. And I don't get it. And I think we're all struggling with it in a way that we're not struggling with devolution, I have to say, because we understand the concept. We may not like it. But this comes back to John's point earlier on, which is what happens when the shotgun marriage has the gun put to our head? What do we do? Do we die and get shot in the head? Well, you can't influence anything if you're dead. The important thing then is to try and make the best of whatever camel emerges. But we have to be forced on it, and if we don't get the money, we will happily die because there's nothing left. But if we do get the assurances, then we may be forced to make the best of a bad job. In the meantime, I'm delighted to see there's majority support with our council colleagues for the Liberal Democrat approach of Hands Off Portsmouth. I hope that will empower you, Steve, and everyone else, poor people who have to be involved in this over the coming weeks and the coming months to deliver half a loaf. But sadly, I do feel the metaphorical equivalent of the Glazers are coming, and our place will be much, much poorer because of their ego and their stupidity. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Darren. I don't disagree. The example I've been using, I mentioned it yesterday, and I've used it in leaders' chief exec meetings on this with all our other partners in the room, are that I can be invited to walk off a cliff and I will decline. However, if I'm pushed off the cliff, then that's on the head of the person who pushed me. So that's where we will, I am no doubt, probably end up. Who's wanting to go next? You?
I might come back on a few other things. I must say I agree with everything which has been said before. I am a great believer in the efficiency which we have achieved with 215,000 people in this city, and that was underlined yesterday by the leader of the Labour group, showing us a French city which is producing its own tramway and running very efficiently as a local government with 115,000 people. But I have two questions, one on devolution and one on the local government reorganisation. On devolution, it would seem to me, questions I think to the Chief Executive, that this is a diminution of democracy. All we are being offered is the chance to elect a mayor. There does not appear to be any way in which we can elect anyone else in that authority. They may be indirectly elected by the, what's it, 5 local authorities, but the power will lie in an elected dictator. This is not democracy as I understand it. Are there any moves to try and push for greater democracy, even to the level that you have with the Greater London Authority, where you elect members to the Greater London Authority? So that's on devolution. On the local government reorganisation, my question actually goes to Chris. Have you any back of the envelope calculations on how much the process of reorganisation, forget the debts we're taking on, but how much the actual process of reorganisation of local government will cost for, let us say, the South East Hampshire region, if that is what we're going to have? Two questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. So I think with regard to devolution, the governance arrangements are prescribed in the letter that we received. So they are prescribed by the Minister, which outlined the constituent members of what the strategic authority will be. So we are informed that they will be 6 constituent members of that authority, 1 being the elected mayor, 1 being the leader of Southampton, 1 being the leader of Portsmouth, 1 being the leader of the Isle of Wight, and 2 seats for the Hampshire County area. So that's how we are told the strategic authority will be constituted, and there will also be an opportunity, I think it's for 5 non-constituent members that can be also part of that. That is a prescribed model that the government in the priority programme has put to us, whereas I think in previous negotiated devolution deals, this is not a deal, this is a offer now. It's a change in the offer in the way devolution is organised. It was more of what local authorities could negotiate around that table, but that's what we're told. that this will be the structure of your devolution body, your strategic authority going forward. So that whole thing around democracy, we do understand there will be elements where there are opportunities for scrutiny, etc. within that. And also, obviously, the leaders of the upper tier authorities, as is at the moment, and obviously with local government reorganisation, if we end up with more than 3 or 4 or 5 new unitaries across Hampshire, each one of those would then take a seat as part of that constituent member of the strategic authority. But that's what is being prescribed to us. We don't actually have a say. When we were looking at our devolution asks document, which you will recall we drafted before Christmas, we were thinking of other mechanisms about how governance could be arranged across the Hampshire and Solent devolution area. But obviously we haven't been able to influence that. It's now prescribed to us.
The analogy I used earlier on was it's a bit like when you walk into a petrol station and they've got that little rack with some cards on it. They've got different experiences on them. This is about the level of where it's at now, and the really ambitious document that we jointly submitted with Hampshire, Southampton and the Isle of Wight, which brought in creative and cultural industries and a whole bunch of other stuff that we're really passionate about and reflected our local area, things like marine specific stuff around marine and maritime, really important industry. That's all parked. They looked at that and said, thank you very much, and here's devolution in a box, because that's what basically we've got. This is a one-size-fits-all. You either want this or you don't have it at all. So, you know, at the end of the day, there are some perceived benefits from having devolved powers down to the local area, and we know what they are, and they're articulated in the report. I'm not going to go over them all again now, but it's incredibly disappointing that this is all that is on offer, and that we have to have a mayor to have that, because actually under the old arrangements, for this little, we wouldn't have needed a mayor at the beginning, and that was the preference of the 4 upper tier local authorities. But we were clearly told, any devolution, got to have a mayor. No, you can't do Solent, which was always our preference. Have to have minimum population, 1.5 million, take it or leave it. So that's literally what was there, no discussion, nothing at all. We were just told that from day one. The second question was to Christopher. And we've just been joined by the City Solicitor.
Well, thank you for that easy question, Councillor Mason. I mean, the short answer is no. But I think what you can start to look at, or other commentators have started to do some work, but I'm not privy to the detail of the information, so can't validate it in any way. But what I can tell you is that there is obviously some work that has gone on in terms of the 3 unitary model that is part of the Hampshire County Council report. So there is some information in there, but you can't disaggregate it to the southeast. You can only see what the cost of the setup, if you like, for the new unitaries would be as part of that arrangement. But it doesn't give you any idea of boundaries. It just talks about a 3 unitary model. For the mainland, that is, so setting aside the Isle of Wight.
Thank you, Chris. Just before you go on, though, I just want to state that we've been very clear, for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, there are options in that Hampshire paper for 2, 3 or 4 mainland unitaries, all of which except the Isle of Wight would stay on its own. I've been absolutely crystal clear with the other Hampshire leaders and chief executives that there is 0 chance that Portsmouth will be forced into a unitary council with Southampton. It's not happening under any circumstances whatsoever. I would expect all 42 members of Portsmouth City Council to resign in protest should anybody ever suggest such an absurd thing. That leaves us with the option for 3. And as you've heard from Natalie, the structure of the new mayoral combined authority currently gives 2 votes to what is the Hampshire County Council area with the districts and boroughs that sit underneath it. And if it were to be 3 councils, those 2 votes would sit with that new council. Now, the mayor has a vote too. If the mayor came from that part of the county rather than the Solent, that would make 3 votes, leaving Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight with 1 each. And under these mayoral arrangements, the mayor has a casting vote. That enables, potentially, the rest of Hampshire to dictate forever to Portsmouth, Southampton and the Isle of Wight if it wants to. Now, that cannot be an acceptable position, and that's one of the reasons why we're arguing for there to be at least 4 to try and create some more balance, plus the Isle of Wight. Sorry, Chris.
Just to add to that, Councillor Mason, in terms of the back of the fag packet stuff, or back of the envelope, the next phase of work with KPMG is to try to do exactly that, is to work out what the costs, in part, what the costs of any setup of new unitary authorities might be. So that's the next phase of work.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else? Matthew?
Thank you. It's been an interesting journey that we've been on so far. And it's been an interesting journey that hasn't been very long. And that's the place I want to start with, which the leader has already mentioned, but this has all been extraordinarily rushed. And I'd also like to add to that and bring together what Councillor Sanders has said, which is what they're trying to do. I don't know. But it does seem like this is all coming from one place, and one place alone, the Treasury. Now, I would say that in the UK as a whole, I don't think people think the Treasury has done a very good job since July. Because pretty much everything that's happened that has basically gone to hell and caused Councillor Heaney's party untold problems at national and local level has come from the Treasury. Let's just think about some of the things that have happened. We had the winter fuel allowance, means testing it. Now, as someone who used to work for the government in the Department for Work and Pensions, I can tell you that means testing costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to administer. So taking it away from being a universal benefit or universal allowance to a means testing allowance, almost certainly, I could tell the Chancellor off on the back of an envelope that it probably won't save you any money at all, or any money you'll save will be minimal, because you'll have to administer it and you'll have to do all the work to administer it. But they did that anyway, and has caused absolutely untold ructions. Yesterday, we had a debate in this very chamber at full council about WASPI. Compensation is not being paid out to WASPI women, even though the Ombudsman has said the government has to pay compensation because of failures over 3 decades. So this isn't just the Labour government now, this is, and actually, it's not this Labour government now at all. It is the Conservative government of the 1990s, it's the Labour government in the 90s and noughties, it's the coalition government of from 2010 to 2015, and the Conservative government since 2015. But this Labour government, they said the underlying reason why they won't do it is because it costs too much. It's the Treasury. And last week, we've had what I can only imagine must be another Treasury wheeze, which is the NHS. So they've abolished NHS England, as I said yesterday. Don't think anyone has any love lost for NHS England. But what a lot of people don't know, because they don't understand, they've also said that all integrated care systems, integrated care boards in the country, those are the boards that are, in our case, it's Hampshire, Isle of Wight, you've got in places around the country, they have to cut 50% of their administration costs by the end of this calendar year. All of those have just had to cut their spending by 30% already. So this is on top. Again, the only conclusion I can come to, this has come from the Treasury, because it's boneheaded, straightforward, and without any thought of any consequences. And that's where we come to local government reorganisation. It's boneheaded, short-sighted, and doesn't have a slightest clue about the consequences. And the thing about the letter that we received from the Minister was about the fact that we have to, that in this fantasy world that they seem to live in, that the Treasury is forcing on MHCLG, in this fantasy world, local governments can absorb the costs of reorganisation through, they don't need any extra money to do it. They can just do it, and it'll all come from efficiencies. I'm not sure quite how that works for an already existing unitary. Bear in mind, we're already one authority, so we can't have any efficiencies because we're already one authority. And also that there is going to be no relief for any ongoing deficits. There is no plan to do debts. There is no plan to come to actually properly fund local government. That's not part of the conversation. That sits over there. That sits over on a completely different place. And all of this is going on while government is also trying to do devolution, as we said, in their manifesto. Really massive bit. I mean, do not underestimate how a massive bit of work this is. This is, if done as the government has mentioned, this is going to be a huge transfer of powers. It's going to be a lot of work to make up these new strategic authorities. That's a big bit of work. That's a good enough big bit of work to be concentrating on. And concentrated, bear in mind, even though LGR is Treasury-led, it all has to be delivered through MHCLG, the local government department. So it's enough for that department to be dealing with devolution, but now they've also got to deal with local government reorganisation done at a breakneck pace for what seems to be no reason whatsoever. Then we've got the NHS. I've already mentioned about what they're doing now, but also they've got their 10-year plan. Huge amount of work, and one of the big things about that is about prevention and collaboration. Collaboration and prevention sits largely with local authorities. So if you're throwing all of your local authorities up in the air, how are you going to be able to work properly in creating the NHS, the future of the NHS, in 2034-35 under their 10-year plan? I don't know. And then we come to social care. We've currently got a social care review going on, looking at social care at the very depths of it. So the area that myself and Councillor Dorrington, as adults and children's social care, are responsible for. This is a 4-year programme. It should be shorter, but it's a 4-year programme, 2028. 2028, coincidentally, is when you're supposed to have the first of these new unitary authorities created. How does that make any sense whatsoever to throw everything up in the air when you've got things that are connected in that you have to do? In this time as well, this government has created commissions coming out of its ears. Commission for this, commission for that. But they don't do that for local governments. What the Local Government Association has said is that we think it would be a good time to do a commission on local government, looking at local government's powers, looking at how it's organised and all that kind of thing. So why don't they do it? Why don't they do that rather than just doing the Treasury's bidding and think in this fantasy universe that this is just going to save loads of money? Because it isn't. Because if a council goes bust, if they do a section 114, do you know what happens? The government has to plough in money to make sure it doesn't go bust, because a council in this country is not allowed to go bankrupt. It's not allowed. So the central government has to plough money in to make sure that that does not happen. And then they also have to pay for commissioners to go in and basically oversee every aspect of spending in that local authority to try and get it onto some kind of even keel. So they have to pay for that as well. So you could have this entire perversity of all this money that local government will spend on a reorganisation because they won't get anything. They don't get any debt relief or any relief from any ongoing structural deficit. And you actually have to have the central government pay out more money in the end anyway. It makes absolutely no sense. And there would be a better way forward with a commission. I have to say, I thank John for coming to speak today. Like John, I'm a Unison member and I'm now in the Hampshire County branch. But he's quite right. The upheaval that's going on for this and across the public sector from government decisions in the last few months is absolutely incredible. Not only do we have, as I've mentioned, as we said about what's going on in LGR, but that NHS announcement last week, can you imagine what it's like for people working for the integrated care boards around the country when they've been told you've just done a 30% reduction in your costs and now you've got a 50% slash by the end of December? Can you imagine what that's like? Can you imagine how efficient those people are going to be when they've got a sword of Damocles holding over their heads? Can you imagine if the government carries on with this crazy timetable, what it's going to be like for our staff to have this sword of Damocles hanging over their heads? And as Councillor Pitt said earlier, can you imagine who wants to work for an organisation where you've got a sword of Damocles, come and work for it as a new thing? This is going to create massive upheaval. But of course, this isn't happening everywhere. Where the Prime Minister has his seat, where the Chancellor has her seat, where the Secretary of State for local government has her seat, where the Minister of State who's in charge of this has his seat, they're all in areas who aren't subject to this at all. We're being picked on because we have the misfortune to live in a ceremonial county, to be a council in a ceremonial county with a two-tier authority next door. That's the only reason. This isn't some kind of great plan. This is just some idiot in the Treasury going, this is a ways to save money. It is no plan whatsoever. Otherwise, you would be saying to every small local authority, every London borough, none of which get 500,000 at all. Lots of metropolitan boroughs, very few of them, very few of them get to 400,000. All those other unitaries around the country which don't hit 500,000, you'd be saying to all of them, sort it out, get yourselves worked through. But it's not. And so we're left as a collateral damage in some wheeze from the Treasury. I've said from the beginning that this is bad for Portsmouth. Any shotgun into this is bad for this city. We will have to deal with enormous amounts of upheaval, enormous amounts of difficulty, and enormous amounts of people in this city having a loss of identity. Something that 30 years ago we did so much to bring back when we became a unitary authority on our own and came away from Hampshire, once again, as had been the case right up until 1973. As Councillor Pitt has said, our neighbours don't want this. Lots of them are quite happy with the way things are. But if you're going to do governments, get rid of two-tier and go to all unitaries, then do it properly. Look at the cost that the local government has. Because all of this is a distraction. It's a distraction from the absolute endless crisis in local government funding. It's the absolute crisis in the way that things are going. Without this, councils are going to go bankrupt anyway. With this, almost every council that's involved in this will go bankrupt, sooner rather than later. And that is a sobering thought. I back this response because the best thing about it is it says very little. We have ticked a box for the government, and we've done what we need to do with our colleagues in the other local authorities in Hampshire, Isle of Wight. And that is absolutely the right thing to do. If we didn't do it, we know the government would take complete control of what goes in Hampshire, and we would lose any influence whatsoever. The most important thing about this report is the last point, where it says about the letter that the council leader will send on behalf of this city council to say hands off Portsmouth. We should not be involved in this. We are a sustainable authority going forwards. If the government wants sustainable local government, they should look at us as a paragon of what to do and not try to get rid of us. A lot of local authorities in the neck of the woods of those 4 senior ministers, including the Prime Minister and the Chancellor that I've mentioned, could take a look at us and look as a paragon and think, actually, there's a lot of local authorities on our patch, in our area, who could take lessons from us. But they don't, because what they're doing is they're looking at a one-size-fits-all, and it's completely lazy. So my message has always been, hands off Portsmouth, but we have to engage, because if we don't, we are in a position whereby we could end up in an authority which really screws us over. We could even end up, God forbid, in an authority with Southampton, which I think would cause unilateral declaration of independence from both Portsmouth and Southampton from the UK, as the Isle of Wight would do if they were forced to go in with anyone on the mainland. I think that would, and I think I've talked to Councillor Sanders about this. I think we would write help write their declaration of independence as well. But it is one of the most wasteful and frustrating things I've ever seen from any government. And I just hope some sense comes to bear when they get back their things, because what they're not getting, and when you look around the country, they are not getting what they want in this. They are not getting a single response that gives a really strong outline from lots of local authorities who are in the priority programme. You are getting responses that are all over the place, and people are looking out for themselves, quite rightly, because when they're not dealing with the money, they're not going to get what they want. So I back the report. I absolutely, particularly back the letter that the leader is going to send on all our behalves. And at every point in this process, it's hands off Portsmouth for me. And if the money isn't made available, I think the message to every local authority in the country should be it's hands off Leicester, Derby, Plymouth, wherever. Because the government at the moment, all they want to do is bankrupt local government.
Thank you, Councillor Winterton. Just before I come to any other colleagues, I will draw your attention to page 21 of the actual report, page 23 in the pack, where under C, it says that Hampshire and the Solent has a population of over 2 million people across 15 local authorities, which includes 3 existing unitaries. Therefore, this will be a large and complex reorganisation programme. Previous local government reorganisation costs for smaller areas have ranged from £12 to £20 million over a 12 to 18 month period to encompass programme management, additional ICT investment, Meeting brand requirements, additional election costs, legal capacity in supporting staff, residents and businesses through the process. Due to the size of Hampshire and the Solent, inflationary pressures, since the other reorganisations have taken place, and the need to implement the reorganisation programme for 3 years, our preliminary benchmarking suggests this could be the most expensive local government reorganisation programme delivered to date, as if we've got nothing better to spend our money on. Anyone else? I'm not going to give 2 bites of the cherry when I didn't put any limit at all on speeches, and everyone's spoken for a minimum of 15 minutes today. So if anyone else would like to come in, that's fine. Dave?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I think it's important that when John came here and gave those 5 points, if we have those 5 points reflected in the minutes, but also the leaders' responses to that to give it a broader context. I do think it's important that the trade union voice is heard and that we can see just how far we are pushing back on this and doing it accurately. Thank you.
Completely agree, Dave. Thank you. Anyone else? Kimberly?
I agree with all the points that have been made today, and it's so incredibly frustrating that we're in this situation, but we're trying to do the best we can with it. I mean, poor Steve, the amount of meetings, I think he's probably been in more meetings with council leaders and he's probably seen his own partner recently. So, and it's not just us that are worried. I've had contact from other councillors from other councils who perhaps not panicking, but are very aware that if we do get grouped together, that they are significantly behind in some of the work compared to what we're doing, especially in my portfolio anyway. So I've already had a couple of chats with them very preliminarily at the moment just to try and sort of say, hang on, wait a minute, but they're very keen to see the work that we're doing because we're in a number of areas across a number of different portfolios. We do things very differently, we have different services available, and we are much further ahead in some of the policies that we have and some of the work we've been doing as well. So, you know, and they're asking questions, how can we get to that point when you know, if we do get combined together, will you take that over? You know, what are our targets for this? What if we're combined because we're doing this and you're doing something differently? So there's so many different factors that are coming into this as well. So I just think that point needs to be made as well, that there are a lot of worried people across different sectors, councillors, council leaders, officers, staff, and the residents as well. And I mean, I talk to residents all the time. I went to drop something off 3 roads away from me, and that took me 45 minutes to get 3 roads away because I was stopped at every opportunity. Because what people were concerned about was this: they feel that their voice has been taken away. They feel they don't have a choice in this, and there's just a whole lack of. I mean, we know that we always struggle. It doesn't matter what party or what background there is always this distrust. Now, even more so, not necessarily with us, but with central government, because people feel their voices have been taken away and that they're having something forced upon them. And I know as soon as you force something upon someone or try and take them along a path they don't want to go through, they'll stick their heels in. And good for them in this case, I have to say.
Thank you. Peter, did you want to come in?
I will, but I will keep it fairly. I think there are 2 huge and completely separate issues that we're trying to cover here at the same time: devolution and local government reorganisation. But both of them suffer from the same 2 major problems. Firstly, a democratic deficit. Devolution was at least in the Labour manifesto, but there has been no local vote and no meaningful local consultation. I have read most of the documents that have been published, and I have taken part in the online survey. Very few people know this even exists, and if you do try to put it, there is no way to say that you don't want it. All you can do is comment about how you would like it done to you. And of course, you're only given 1,000 words to do that. 1,000 words for a topic that encompasses devolution and a massive reorganisation of local government, the size of which we haven't seen for 50 years. What's worse is this is being driven by crazy deadlines, which are guaranteed to result in errors, omissions and unintended consequences. I feel for the officers here who have had to start this meeting by talking about an error of £100 million in a document that was put out. I know the care with which these things are normally taken. It is just fantastical that we're being asked to produce and give answers on the timelines that we are being tasked to do. So, if we thought winter fuel allowances and national insurances resulted in problems, it is going to be absolutely nothing compared to this. We're also talking about the abolition of Portsmouth as a separate city. Just stop and say that sentence a couple of times, and better, try saying it to a few residents in the street. I've tried it, they don't like it. However, the national government have said that they will force this through by legislation or ministerial decree if needed. But there are also, even if they're going to do that, very, very basic questions remain. We are supposed to be electing a mayor in 14 months' time. But can the chief executive tell me where that mayor will be based? My residents have been asking me, I cannot tell them. Local government reorganisation is going to be imposed upon us. But when, how, and on what borders will the next election, or the election to that body, be fought? I don't know. I can't tell anyone. If someone can tell me, please do. But we've already seen elections that have to be cancelled because of this process. Where will this process end? I have no answers. The second thing is the negative financial impact. So on this, the first point is the absolute lack of clarity. And this is arising from two sources: the lack of time to collect the data and prepare the reports. I have had internal council reports called in because I've been unable to answer questions on very small budgetary matters. Here, we have millions of pounds floating around which people cannot give straight answers to. And secondly, and I think this is worse, there is deliberate, and there's a very good word for this, obfuscation. It basically means the hiding of information, the deliberate concealment of things. Letters and questions are being asked, they are not being answered, or incompletely answered, or answered in different ways on different times. This should simply be unacceptable. The second point is on the financial affairs is, from all the evidence that is available, Portsmouth residents will be much worse off, especially through the local government reorganisation. There is the cost of doing this, the transition cost. We don't know how much it is, but as the leader has said, it is going to be large. But forcing Portsmouth to take on the deficit from Hampshire, plus the many problems of the surrounding areas, based on the deprivation data that has been collected to date and what we know, will inevitably result in things getting worse for Portsmouth residents. A shotgun marriage to Hampshire, Gosport, Fareham, Havant, or who knows where, will almost inevitably lead to Portsmouth residents paying more in council tax and getting less in terms of the local government services that they actually like and respect. There is every chance indeed that the new body, as yet not even named, that will replace Portsmouth, a city that has stood for hundreds of years, will be bust on day one. How can I possibly support such a plan? But I believe in the law, and I'm therefore complying with the government diktat. But at the point of the gun, and I want that on record, we are given no alternative. But let's be clear, this is a top-down dictate. All I can do is try my best within the limits imposed upon us. So that's why I will ultimately support this initial response, because we have to, or else we have been told there will be negative financial consequences. But I hope we will have the chance, once we have passed through the gate, to show the government that they are wrong in their approach, wrong in their analysis, and there are better ways of doing things like devolution and the local government reorganisation that are on the table at the moment and being forced upon us. Portsmouth has a clear local identity. I don't want to lose that or be responsible for it. There is no credible evidence that big is necessarily better. Credible institutions like the Institute for Government found that actually size was not a determinant of the effectiveness of local government. What mattered was the quality of the leadership and the care with which it exercised its work. Big is not necessarily better. So my view is clear. The right answer is hands off Portsmouth, but if I cannot do that, I will, at the point of a gun, continue to support the direction that we are being forced to go, and do so to the best that I can to protect Portsmouth residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we there? Looks like it. Very quickly, just to sum up, something else John mentioned earlier on, which I also referenced yesterday, is that £8 billion forecast funding gap that the LGA say will exist for local government by 2028-29. That's rapidly approaching now, and that £8 billion needs to be fixed. So we all know what happened. It was the Angela Rayner and her colleagues from MHCLG walked up the road to have a chat with Rachel from Accounts and her civil servants, and they said, we've got this £8 billion problem. That's what the LGA says. It's cross parties, not one party saying it. All the parties in local government working together have commissioned this piece of work. They've added up all the gaps, comes to £8 billion. And the Treasury team said, we're not getting it from ours. That's what's happened. So some bright sparks dusted off a dusty old, already discredited County Council Network report written 5 years ago during the pandemic and said, oh yes, this will work. What we know now, published last week, is the updated PwC figures show that the saving that was forecast 5 years ago is nothing like that now. It's now down to under 2 billion. So where's the other 6 billion coming from? There will still be a gap in local government finances by 2028-29. This government is in total disarray and being run by a would-be economist from number 11 Downing Street who is depowering all the other ministers and civil servants on an economy drive that makes what happened during the coalition government years look like a tea party. It's unbelievable that this is coming from a Labour government. What we have to have is time. We have to be able to consult. John was right. We need to consult properly with the unions. We need to consult with our communities and with those communities who may or may not want to join us, but we should ask them and we should listen to what they say. And we haven't been able to do that in a month. The city's partners, our partners in healthcare at the university, the key businesses and stakeholders across the city, our cultural and creative partners, the voluntary and community sector. We need to be able to go and talk to everyone meaningfully and get their feedback to know what their expectations and their concerns are so that they can be fed back too. And all the time we're having to do all of that because we've got no choice. We need to keep making the case. I'll probably get fed up of writing letters to Jim McMahon saying, here's a bright idea, leave us alone. Because we are perfectly capable of sustaining ourselves if you do the right thing and you find the 8 billion quid that your government knows full well you need to find by 2028-29 to allow local services across the country to be kept just at their current level. And whether it's the £136 million that the county is saying today is the gap, or the £216 million they were saying 2 weeks ago was the gap, or whatever figure it comes up with by later in the year, it's still a very, very big gap. And the idea that a unitary authority like Portsmouth that's made £110 million worth of savings since 2009-2010 is able to go and close a big gap in that hole is not going to happen. It just can't happen without deleting all non-statutory services in this city, and that is not something that this administration will ever support, and I don't believe it's something that any elected member of Portsmouth City Council would support. So that inevitably means a bun fight between the new bits coming in to a newly aligned South East Solent unitary, meaning that all of us are at each other's throats from day one. There is division across the piece. There's the former borough areas ganging up on the unitary, the former unitary, because they don't want to lose their services that they quite rightly wish to defend, because the only place to go for that is the money, because the money coming over from Hampshire is almost all statutory. There isn't any discretionary spend in it, very, very little. It's all statutory stuff. So for that to come across with a big hole in it, the only way the savings can be made is to take out all the discretionary services from all of the surrounding areas. And I know that those council leaders don't want that as much as we don't either. So we are in a very, very serious situation. We have no choice but to go along dragging our feet as much as we possibly can, answering their questions and doing the right thing, but not doing a single thing to encourage them to believe that we think this is a good idea or that we're going to accept it lying down. So, we considered the report yesterday. We did have some feedback from a number of elected members on a bunch of different things, but they were grouped around, as you know, because you were there, the same themes that we've discussed today, the same questions, the same themes. So we will take those comments forward. I did check the list earlier on. There's nothing on that that was specifically brought up that we haven't covered either in Natalie's comments or amongst the members who are present today. But we will review that and we'll take forward the relevant points and make sure that the comments and members from across the chamber that were fed into the council meeting yesterday are reflected in the letter that will go from me as agreed next week. So on that basis, members, are you happy with the, well, not happy, I think it's completely the wrong word. Are you resigned? Are you resigned to accepting the recommendation in the recommendations in the report based on the fact that we actually don't have a choice? We are reluctantly agreed, Anna, for the minutes, and I would like the word reluctantly to be reflected in the minutes. Colleagues, thank you for your time today.